Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Reasoned Live with me, Darren Grimes. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by my mate Mahyar Tousi, the incredibly popular political YouTuber with more followers than most religions these days. Mahyar, how are you doing?
Wow, what an intro. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm good. No, cheers for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, to those watching at home, I encourage you all to comment along on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I can see all of your comments on my little in-app chat window here. So if you've any questions, criticisms, or compliments about Mahyar Tousi's hair, please do fire them across and we'll endeavour to answer them. Now, also, if you enjoy the stream tonight, please do consider donating to Reason's GoFundMe page, as we are actually halfway to hitting our target and it helps us keep on doing what we're doing. We really cannot do this channel without your support, so cheers for that. Anyway, Mahyar, what do you reckon explains the success of your YouTube channel that I describe as having more followers than most modern day religions?
Yeah, I did not say that. I think at the time, of the like year or so ago, it just happened to be at the right time, in the right place, and it wasn't. I realized there was a bit of a problem in the mainstream media in terms of obviously being biased towards Remainers and the lefties and all that. But a lot of people thought that in order to counter that, we just have to talk about right wing, kind of like a right wing angle. Then I realized actually that probably is not even necessary. And the one thing that's lacking is the sort of topics and discussions that are not being mentioned in the mainstream media. So all I did was I just started talking about, migration or obviously Brexit and what the details of the Brexit bill and all that stuff. I think people just wanted to hear more about certain topics rather than necessarily the angle, because obviously that would be also bias from my own side, right-wing bias. I don't think it was because of the fact that it was kind of a right-wing angle. It was just that finally someone was talking about certain topics.
And what sort of topics do you think really get people going? What sort of topics do you think the likes of the BBC and Sky News won't touch that your channel, really highlights and focuses on?
I mean, Femi's tight t-shirts for one.
Oh wow, they are quite something, aren't they?
No, there's a few things. Obviously, deep inside the concept of Brexit, they didn't really talk about. They were just throughout the whole thing since 2016. The Brexit, when it was debated in the mainstream media, it was just the gossip of what was happening in Parliament and how you got two sides. You got Remainers and Brexiteers, and everyone's shouting at each other. No one was actually talking about the real issues, whether it was trade or immigration or any of that stuff. So Europe as a topic, people care about that because it affects us still. Free speech, I realize that obviously matters to a lot of people. Well, it should matter to everybody.
Yeah,
And, right now, obviously, what's happening with the cultural wars, I realize
yeah.
that the mainstream media do not touch it, and we do.
We've got our first question from Red Sky at Night, and Red Sky at Night says, "What's your opinion on the corona? Do you guys believe it's as bad as they say? Also, how do you feel about being masked after 5 months of not wearing them?" Now, I personally hate masks, and it's not because, I'm some Peter Hitchens style libertarian. I'm absolutely not. But I just find them so dehumanizing. I don't know about you, but I just think, going into a supermarket, having an interaction with the members of staff there, being able to smile at people, you just lose all of these parts of what fundamentally make us human. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this mask debate is actually just a tiny bit kind of example of the whole process, because since day one, obviously we're not really experts when it comes to science of and in terms of we can't really have our own inquiry in terms of how bad or how strong coronavirus was. We'll find out soon. But from the first moment of the lockdown, where ordinary people were treated, well, across the Western world, basically, not just in this country, as idiots. So we have to teach you. We are going to have to put signs,
Yeah.
teach you how to wash your hands,
Patronizing, yeah.
and yeah, and then obviously do this, do that. Don't sit there, stand there. I get that. Let's just say, obviously COVID is a big deal. Let's just go with that, and we have to deal with it, or any other kind of pandemic. Um, there are guidelines. And you could, feel free to tell people, guys, be more hygienic, wash your
Yeah,
hands.
yeah,
But this patronizing kind of mentality that you have to have signs everywhere, that's weird. The other thing is that with the masks, I think most of the decisions from the government side have just been political, not scientific. They've been saying scientific, but it's just political. So they reopened most of society with all the bars and restaurants. Then the decision to have the masks now
yeah,
in shops is political, just to make sure, well, more like psychological, to show people that, oh, guys, we are reopening, but it's not over yet.
yeah.
Another kind of a nudge to remind people, because every time you have your mask on, you basically in your head you keep thinking the lockdown is still happening. I think it was just a psychological thing to push people, so they'd be like, you're not completely free yet.
To try and like nudge people's behaviour, because I think, as you say, the science is pretty mixed on the effectiveness of masks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Maya, can we go back to talking about you, which I know is a topic that you're not too shy of talking about, lol. And I wonder, can you tell me the story? Tell our listeners the story of your family coming to the UK. And do you think that this explains really why you're so passionate in your pride of Britain?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So for those who don't know, my background is Persian. I was actually born in Iran. I came here as a kid. My mum was a political refugee, so a proper one. And so obviously when she was accepted, I then came here as a kid because I was under 18. And I think the reason I'm passionate about politics in general is because when you're born and grew up in a country like Iran, where on the surface things are relatively okay, it's not like people getting shot on the streets unless there's a protest. But you have to always be kind of up to date with current affairs and news, because it affects every single moment of your life. So even as a kid, I was interested to kind of watch the news and read newspapers in Iran. The reason I became passionate about what I do here in this country and the culture is because when we came here, we had to leave a country that completely destroyed, took away all our freedoms, and we didn't have anything in terms of as a free human being on this planet. And Britain gave us all the things that people here technically deserve. Your individual liberties, the basic human rights. So we decided to realize that the only way to do it is you have to embrace the culture. It did really help that there are a lot of similarities between the British culture and the Persian culture, whether it's from the sense of humor, the dry sense of humor, sarcasm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're more kind of similar compared to other certain cultures. So it was a lot easier to embrace the British culture as opposed to if I were to move to Germany, let's just say.
Now, what was the reason for fleeing and coming to this country? What was actually happening?
Yeah, so my mum wasn't actually political, but the problem is even if you're a normal person in those countries, you fall into trouble, and she had some issues with the morality police. So in Iran, they have morality police where they go around telling people how to dress, how to behave. Women still can't ride bicycles. They can drive cars. It's not like Saudi, but they can't have bicycles. They can't have chewing gum. They can't technically smoke because it's a taboo. So there's a lot of issues, obviously, and it just escalated, and she had to come here. But since I basically was raised here and I got into politics, the Iranian government are not my biggest fans. I'm technically banned from going back to Iran. Not that I want to go. And I was like, you're banning someone who doesn't even care about going back. So well done, guys.
Totally. I mean, how much do you think that your background has actually influenced your politics? Because you describe yourself as a classical liberal, and I wonder if that worldview of limited government, of valuing freedom and liberty, in all of your video content, you put those things above all else. They're your priorities in politics. And I wonder if that comes just entirely as a byproduct of your family background and not wanting to live under an authoritarian state ever again.
Yeah, I think massively. But as a teenager, when I was, before I actually got well, with party politics, and when I was part of the Tory party and all that, I knew that I was, well, right wing before I knew I was a Tory. And it's because when I started reading kind of stuff as a teenager, from your economics, your kind of your Hayeks and Mises to then philosophy and John Locke and everyone, I realized it was always built in for me without realizing. So I think the way I would describe myself, because these labels are quite difficult these days, I have three categories, which makes it a lot easier. So I'm economically free market capitalist. Socially, I'm liberal, but culturally, I'm conservative. So a lot of times people put the cultural and social stuff in the same category. I think some of the stuff that people say social conservatism should be cultural conservatism, whether it's your country, your flag, your borders, law and order, security, family values. For me, when I say social liberalism, I'm talking about individual liberties. Just do whatever you want to do. Don't harm anybody else. At this point, I don't care what you're going to dress up as, I don't care what you're going to call yourself, as long as you don't enforce any other policy that would affect me, whether it's like genderless toilets or anything like that, that's when I will object. Otherwise, do whatever you want to do in your life.
And do you think those reservations extend to the sort of the attempt at denying truth? And I would argue that the debate that we have in this country over self-identification, for example, is seeking to deny truth. So, as you've just said, do whatever you like, as long as it's legal and isn't harming anyone, fine. But you can't attempt to change truth and have force someone else to accept biological fantasy, basically.
Yeah, I think you're right on it, to the point where what the left have done over the past few decades in the West is that they have picked all these battlegrounds. A lot of them are social stuff, like social issues. So whether it's like LGBT stuff, well, LGBTQZY, or anything else, is that what they do is they take over the argument to then actually, not necessarily because they care about people who are trans or gay, it's actually what they do is they use them, and they use the individuals and the debate to shut down reality and the truth and free speech. So everyone's being used by them. It's the same with the Muslims. The left love Islam, and up to a point where if you criticize the religion, Islam, they'll say you're against all Muslims, which is because that absolutely makes no sense. The free speech goes down, truth goes down, and then Fantasyland comes up.
Now, I wonder, I keep going back to your background, but with that family background in mind, do you see any similarities? Because there are a lot of commentators, and I've had criticism from people after I've spoken out about the English Channel and how the government actually needs to get a grip of this crisis.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of people saying, oh, you would have been someone who would have turned away Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I find that comparison to be utterly offensive to all of those who lost their lives in the 30s, right? Because 30s and 40s. Because if we think about the fact that at the English Channel, in Calais, these economic migrants are just that, economic migrants who are pursuing a better life in the United Kingdom because we've got good labour laws and, settlement for refugees, those with refugee status.
Yep.
And fundamentally as well, Maya, they are in France, the 6th largest economy in the world. And last time I checked, France is not in a state of war. France is a safe country that any refugee seeking actual asylum could do so quite happily,
Yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things about this whole topic, and I could rant about it for days, because firstly, you're right. Every single person on those boats coming from France is a migrant, not a refugee, because, in their defense, they're leaving France. Why would they stay there? But it's the moment you get into mainland Europe, because the majority are coming from the Middle East or North Africa, and so there was this Sky News reporter who was interviewing the people on the boat and saying, oh, where are you from? And then people were saying, like, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, or whatever. Are you really saying that you got on a boat from Afghanistan and then you ended up in Dover? No, you didn't. You ended up going through probably Turkey or Greece and then going through kind of Central Europe and then probably through Germany or France. You were a refugee when you were there. And, some of them might have actually had proper reasons, but they might have gotten rejected by those countries, or they were just greedy, just like, we're going to skip these countries, go straight to the UK for the reasons you mentioned. The problem I have with this concept is it undermines two issues. Undermines real refugees and also real migrants, legal migrants who want to economically come here, contribute, and actually benefit from the system. So that's fine. It undermines that, and also undermines our own society. We have ordinary people in poverty. We still have people homeless. We still have people who can't actually have good living standards. I mean, things are a lot better than they were about 10 years ago under Labour, but we still have issues, and we're not really taking care of our own people. This is not some sort of nationalist kind of rant. A country is like your home. You have a door, you have a border, you look after your own first, and then you take care of your neighbours if you want to, if they're nice to you.
Yeah. Now, I wonder though, you must have sympathy with genuine refugees, right? You must see the value in the UK as a beacon of freedom and refuge for those who could be, as in Iran, either fleeing from an authoritarian theocracy, or as in the likes of Syria, fleeing war and imminent death, right? Where do you think the distinction has to be made between deciding what is and isn't a genuine case of refugee status?
Most of the time you could actually tell if you have a conversation with certain people. So, for example, look at Hong Kong. We have now opened the doors to all the people from Hong Kong, but only a small percentage who've said that they are willing to leave Hong Kong, come to London, because they love their country, they love their land, and they want to fight, they want to keep fighting there. It's the same with the Iranian refugees who left after the 79 revolution. The reason I say there's a difference between migrants and refugees is because the majority of the Iranians who moved here 40, 30 years ago, and they are living in America, a lot of them are in LA, and in London and other places, in Paris, they are hungry. They're waiting to go back to Iran. The moment the system changes and becomes free, they want to go back home. Obviously, a lot of them are going to settle. Not everybody will go back. I don't think my family will go back. I'm not going anywhere. But that's the best way to find out if someone is a genuine refugee, because they still love their country, and especially if they were adults when they came here, obviously, not as a kid. It's difficult to obviously have the same connection. So a lot of the Iranians, and I would say the same about people from Hong Kong, when things get better, they don't want to stay in the West. They want to, unless they have created some sort of business or family that they can't leave anymore. A lot of people are just waiting to go back to Iran.
Now, do you agree with me that obviously everyone agrees that we must stop the deaths from people, in these unseaworthy boats seeking to get across the English Channel? But if you want to stop the drownings, then you have to stop the boats. So I wonder, Mahyar, do you agree with me that we need to look at similar things to what the likes of Australia did, which was a policy of towbacks or turning the boats around? Because in my view, there can be nothing liberal or progressive about encouraging the trade of people traffickers and illegality.
Yeah, so at this point, it's not really about the individuals, the migrants, the illegal migrants. It's big business. It's a criminal gang, these smugglers. And people said that, how can you turn the boats around back to Calais? What if they drown on the way back? It's a long way. Really? Australia turn the boats back to a lot of other places that are quite far away from Australia. Between Dover and Calais, it's not that far, and so that's a terrible excuse. And as you said, Darren, we kind of have to sometimes any policy. You should never judge it based on its intention completely. Judge it by its outcome. Yes, as a policy, it could be kind of harsh, to reject the boats. But in reality, it will the outcome of it will be safer, will be a lot better for the individuals and also obviously for our country as well. Because if the smugglers lose their battleground right now, because it's like it's like Disneyland for these people. They're just like easy route. They're making millions of pounds every year, and because nobody's stopping them. The French boats are escorting them, and the border force are taking them in like taxis. And if you stop that route, then smugglers will lose money. They're going to have to go find something else. They're going to have to, because these are criminals, they'll find a different vocation to do. So, but you have to stop them, yeah.
And I think the real issue, surely, is that throughout much of my life, the British people have made clear time and again in election after election that they want border security, lower immigration and real control. And the response from our politicians, Mahyar, is always, oh, it's too difficult, human rights laws, it can't be done. It's just simply not good enough.
Well, yeah, because firstly, for decades, we were told as voters that you're not allowed to talk about it, otherwise you're racist, especially under Tony Blair. And it was only in over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and just before when the referendum was announced by David Cameron, that people were allowed to talk about immigration. And it was actually kind of thanks to Nigel Farage and his success in the 2010 elections and again 2015, even though he didn't actually win seats, but it was about the movement. And that's how we got the Brexit referendum. And now talking about immigration, even on the mainstream media, is now acceptable, which is finally about time. This country is not racist. People say that you can't talk about immigration. I've been to a lot of people have been to other countries. I have cousins who live in Germany. The so-called progressive liberal Germany, they still get beaten up every now and then in alleyways.
Wow, that's terrible.
But they're used to it. They're like, oh, it's a Tuesday. Just because we're slightly brown skin. But you don't see that in the UK. You don't really see. The worst you get is a drunk person, once a year or every few months, telling someone, "Oh, go back home." Oh, if that's the level of racism I'm going to get, I'm welcoming it. I don't.
And of course, that's still terrible, and that should be challenged. But you can't argue that sort of thing from a ignorant arse, I'm going to swear, an ignorant arse is a sign that the UK as a whole is institutionally racist.
No, but it's so niche. This is a minority of a minority. And obviously I've received racist comments as well. I mean, mostly from the left, ironically, which is really quite funny, and the Remainers. But it's a very niche topic in a sense that the people on the left, the cultural Marxists who want to eliminate racism, you cannot eliminate prejudice in terms of every single individual person on this planet. There will still always be a few who are prejudiced, who are ignorant. But we've already eliminated mass racism because of, good education and obviously the way the Western society has become more civilized over the last century or so. And so, as a whole, firstly, our institutions they're not racist. As a society in general, the masses, not racist. So I'd say we've already won the battle. But what the left claim that they want to do is they want to find the 5-6 people left who are openly racist and want to change their mind. Good luck finding them. But that's not how human psychology works.
Yeah, just a reminder to everyone watching that if you comment along and ask some questions, I can read them out. I know, Mahyar, you are stretched for time. What time have you got to be away?
Got about 5 minutes left.
Cool. Let's talk about Andrew Neil. So, could Andrew Neil, as BBC chairman, save the corporation? So, for context, for those watching, on Sunday, the Sunday Times ran a piece reporting that Andrew Neil and Nicky Morgan were in the frame for BBC chairman. It says that Boris Johnson is seeking to rebuild bridges with the BBC by appointing as its new chairman a prominent figure from the right who doesn't want to blow up the national broadcaster. The Prime Minister has drawn up a long list of possible leaders, understood to include the former Cabinet Ministers Nicky Morgan and wait for this, Mahyar, Amber Rudd, and the television interviewer Andrew Neil. Now, first of all, I want you to just give me a little bit of feedback on what you think about Nicky Morgan and Amber Rudd in the job as BBC chairman.
Yeah, I mean, the headline said they're considering right-wing people for that job, and then they mentioned Nicky Morgan. Wait, where's the right-wing?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think that, yeah, that's kind of funny. The level of competence that we've seen from both of them when they were government
Well,
ministers.
that's the mainstream media's idea of being on the right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They probably think Amber Rudd is a fascist. Then when it comes to Andrew Neil, it's interesting because so there are still people who are against the BBC and like people on the right and want to reform it or get rid of it. But they've been quite sympathetic towards this idea of having Andrew Neil because they're very hopeful. They believe that maybe Andrew Neil could come and actually reform it from inside. No, Andrew Neil could save the BBC because that was the question, but only in terms of survival and not in terms of reform. And that's why I think it's a bad idea because what the BBC would do, and these crown and bureaucrats, is that they want to have someone like Andrew Neil to shut us up for a while, so that they say, "Look, we got Andrew Neil now. You should be happy," and then they could buy another few
Yeah,
years,
exactly.
10 years, their life, because otherwise it's drowning. The BBC is just about to drown, and then they're going to obviously send Andrew Neil to save them a bit for a few years. It's not going to last forever anyway. But I think because of this, because I love Andrew Neil, he's great and he'll be brilliant for the job.
Totally.
But actually, because of that, it's a bad idea because he will save the BBC for a few years. This is the perfect time. Finally, we have with all the movements, obviously that you're part of, defund the BBC and everything else. That this is our time to completely push it down, reform the system, get rid of the structure the way it is, and then hopefully get rid of the liberal lefties.
I mean, even if Andrew Neil was to be given the top job as BBC chairman and, sorts out the behemoth institution, I'd still reckon that I'll always believe that the extremely regressive BBC funding model is morally outrageous and, in my view, inexcusable in the age of paywalls and subscription services, right? Andrew Neil's not going to fix that. It'll still be the same.
Yeah, it's not his job to do that, the funding structure. My problem with the BBC, unlike others, controversial opinion, is not their bias. I have no problem with their bias. News channels like newspapers should be free to be biased. It's just that the ownership and the funding structure, that's been my problem. As you said, it's actually morally wrong. It makes no sense. It's very outdated. So if they want to be an open and free outlet, an enterprise, private, and become openly biased, left or right, brilliant. I have no problem with that. But taxpayers should not fund it, especially the way the model works, because it's really weird now. Even if you don't have TV, you still have to technically pay because you have a phone, and on that phone you could technically have your iPlayer app. So technically everybody should be paying, even if you don't have a TV. It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, totally. It's just, as I say, it's the idea that I've got two more questions, by the way, so you will be able to go soon. But it's the way in which single mothers, for example, statistically more likely to be at home when the TV licence authorities come knocking at the door. Young people, students, statistically more likely to be in their student accommodation, rented accommodation, while studying. And they face these fines and potentially criminal records for daring to not pay for the BBC's licence fee. Why should they face these sanctions to fund podcasts on Karens or all of this biased content that they might have absolutely no interest in whatsoever? Me sitting watching Newcastle United get thrashed on Sky Sports, because that's live television, I've got to fund the BBC. That's ridiculous in 2020.
Yeah, you're right. But this is the culture we've created, the media culture, the broadcast, essentially, journalism. And it's not just the BBC that's the problem, it's Ofcom as well, because they could get rid of the BBC and they will have something else if they want to. This is a cabal that's been dominating this area for decades. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Now, defend the police. I think that's what the hashtag should be. It shouldn't be defund the police, it should be defend the police. Now, for context of what we're going to talk discuss here. A senior Met police official condemned the trial by social media faced by officers who stopped a car carrying a Labour MP, former Shadow Equalities Minister Dawn Butler, and she accused the force of racial profiling after the stop on Sunday. I believe it was last Sunday. She shared footage of the incident on a Twitter account, which has spread widely on social media, and the Deputy Commissioner, Sir Steve House, defended the officers, who he said acted professionally and politely. I actually agree. I think Dawn Butler was really rude to those police officers. But my view is that if a police officer pulled me over and searched my bag, I'd be very grateful to know that in doing so, they're statistically more likely to find those my age and younger, that are a lot younger actually, that are carrying a blade. Our coppers can't seem to do right for doing wrong. You've said yourself that you'd support being searched and you wouldn't, accuse someone of racism. What is your view on this?
Yeah, so I have spoken to a couple of friends who are police officers, and they've explained the way they operate. Firstly, the police have received some criticism from our side because they seem to have not acted during the BLM riots. But my friends were saying, it's not actually their fault because they can't do anything. They have to wait for the command coming from the top, which at the end is Cressida Dick. And the issue I have is that the police in this country is actually one of the best in the world. I've been to Paris and I've seen the police officers there, how scary they are, big with massive guns, and they'll just look at you as if you're enemies. Like in a lot of other countries, including Iran, the police walk around the streets as if they're just treating every single citizen as enemies, potential enemies. They're just waiting to, cause chaos. In Britain, it's completely the other way around. So I have been stopped about 2 or 3 times a couple of years ago during the kind of massive risk that we had with the Islamist terrorism about 2017, 2018 in London. And the police officer that stopped me, it was a very specific area, it was East London, at a certain time. They stopped me very politely and they said, they explained why. This is, we were just being given warnings about this area, this time. And we apologize, but I just want to kind of essentially search you or check you, check your ID and all that. And that was it. And I was like, oh, no problem. Because it's not their fault that I happen to have the same skin color as a terrorist. So if that's the case, I'd rather if they, search me in case, because, instead of me, it could have been a national terrorist. So you have to support the police because they already feel the pressure from the top, the management, because I don't give them enough powers. And they feel the pressure from the left because they want to defund them. So let's not give them too much pressure, the individual police officers from our side, because somebody has to thank them. It's a very thankless job.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I fear that soon enough the activists won't even have to campaign on platforms to defund the police. They'll just leave of their own accord. It must be demoralising. You're under constant attack and you must be in a constant state of anxiety and fear that leaves them of the view that the job just simply isn't worth doing.
It is silly. And you have some people, so you have a couple of police officers going to Brighton Pride and dancing around wearing pink, and then everybody else would treat every single police officer as the same. They're saying, well, we saw a couple of police officers who are woke, so that means the whole police is now woke. It's not true. It's not fair on all the other officers who just want to do their job. And the problem is that those woke police officers doing that, virtue signaling, will never get the gratitude or the thank you from the left anyway. It's not like the left are suddenly going to be pro-police because, the police officer dancing pink.
Now, final topic, the teachers' unions.
Yeah.
I've said Boris must stand, with Thatcher-like resolve, stare down the teachers' unions who are arguing it's too unsafe to send our kids back to school. Now, the kids are a group that it's been proven in study after study, they aren't harmed from the virus.
Yeah.
So I say to the teachers' unions, how about they accept their own risk analysis and avoid our supermarket shops and restaurants,
But for the teaching unions and the left, it's nothing to do with the kids or the health risks. This is just politics. They're just using that as an excuse to to cause chaos, to control education as usual, and it makes no sense because we have a country and in 2020 where the teaching unions and left-wing teachers are against education and schools. You got the Labour Party that's against the working class. You got the Liberal Democrats who are against liberalism and democracy. It makes absolutely no sense what's happening here. I think with the unions, you're right. We have to be strong. We have to send Gavin Williamson and Boris himself to just stand up to them. I just don't feel like there are times with this cabinet, certain areas, because they know that they obviously have the support of the public, so they are quite strong. Whether it's Brexit negotiations or things like that, or with the lockdown measures, they were like, yeah, let's just do it. It's popular. But I feel like with other things, whether it's migration or whether it's the education right now with teaching unions, when it's like a bit of a grey area for them, that if they don't have the confidence, you don't really see any strong and stable behaviour from the cabinet, from Boris Johnson's government, and it's quite sad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the UCL Institute of Education, they, as far as arguing that we need to get our kids back as soon as possible, on average, they've been doing 2.5 hours of schoolwork per day during lockdown. And then that massively varies from kids in the southeast doing more than 4 hours compared with only 9% in the northeast. And then 31% of private schools were delivering 4 or more hours of live online lessons, with state schools at only 6%. So how can those left-wing unions who claim to be progressive and care about the working class, they purport to be, the Labour Party is purportedly the party of the working class, yet they're clearly allowing our kids to be put on the back burner and sacrificing their futures?
This is what they always want, because they're doing the right thing for their ideology. They don't want to help people to come up or use the ladder, as we say. They want to keep people down there. They want all these kids from these deprived areas to do badly in their results, and the working classes to stay either unemployed or in poor jobs. It's the same with immigrants in general. So economic migrants, when they come here, the left always say, well, we should bring low-skilled workers from other countries because obviously the Brits won't do these jobs. And then you're going to have masses of low-skilled foreign workers. And then 10 minutes later, the left would say, oh, it's a really shame. That's a big problem that immigrants in this country are having low-paid jobs and not doing as well as white people. Like, you just brought low-skilled workers. This was your idea. And now you're complaining that they're not doing as well as the rest of the population. It's because that's what they want. They want to keep everyone down. They want to bring down the rich. As long as everyone's poor equally, they're happy.
Well, Maya, I know you've got to dash off. So where can people find you on Twitter and YouTube?
Yeah, so luckily it's just my full name, both on Twitter and YouTube. So twitter.com or youtube.com/Mahyar Tousi. So feel free to subscribe, check out my stuff and see if you enjoy it. And hopefully, and keep supporting Darren and his channel. It's really good.
Thank you very much. All right. Cheers, Maya. Have a good night.
Bye.
Right. I'm still here, don't worry.
Perfect.
Get those comments coming in. I see you're still coming in thick and fast. As always, though, do consider subscribing to our channel on YouTube, Reasoned UK. I think Maya said a lot of good things in that interview there. I think he's a really brave person, actually, because every single day he's putting out new opinions. But I think with the rise of Maya's YouTube channel and with the rise of Reasoned UK as well, I only launched this channel from this bedroom at the start, just a month into lockdown. And I think it's the rise of those channels, the rise of channels that are offering alternatives to the mainstream media, that are wanting to get across the views of those who don't get a hearing from the BBC and Sky News, and actually to allow people to form views and give their views and not shut them down with gotcha moments and gotcha style journalism. it's clear to me that people have just had enough. That people are crying out for common sense. They're crying out for people to stand up and say, you know, Britain isn't a bad country. We are not a bad people. The British people have done a lot of good in the world and continue to do a lot of good in the world. I'm proud to be British, and I don't want to be lectured every 2 minutes about how much of a weak, insignificant, racist backwater that we are. Great Britain is still just that. Great. The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is still a fantastic place to live and be from. It's why so many people are trying to get across the English Channel. They recognise that this country is somewhere to really be proud of being from. And I just think people need channels and outlets to hear that a bit more. They're so tired of the middle class, media class, the establishment class, sneering down at them, telling them that what we've got is what, for thousands of years, English men and women and Welsh men and women, Scottish Welsh men and Northern Irish Welsh men and women have all stood up for those values of being British. And we should all be proud of that. And I think that's what's starting to happen. People have just had enough, and they're standing up and they're being counted. And it's brave because, you know, this cancel culture risks your job, your livelihood. But people are still saying, no, this is worth fighting for. Enough is enough. So please do consider supporting Reasoned UK if you can. And yes, thank you for joining me and Maya today. I think it's been a good discussion, and I appreciate you all immensely. Thank you for all of the comments and getting involved. You're all brilliant. Have a good night. It's going to rain, actually. I can't bloody wait. It's been boiling hot. Terrible. Anyway, see yous later. Cheers.